Hi. Um, it's kind of around 11 at night. Um, I just had some thoughts that I thought I might want to talk about. Recently I was just speaking with my mom and I realized something. In this case, for this recording or this video, I want to talk about two things in particular. The first one being conversations, and the second one is friendships. And I want to say that the conversation part, the social exchange part, ties in with friendships, which is why I'm gonna talk about it after. And then afterwards, I'm going to have my own self-reflection, because I think this is currently impacting my life and I'm trying to comprehend it, whether or not, if something is my fault, if it's not even my fault, but just, life and us having to move on. So nothing really too personal there, just trying to make sense for my own situation. So the first thing we're talking about is conversations, and I'm just going to assume, a two-way conversation. So you speaking with another person. Now let's just say, usually when you're talking, you guys are exchanging roles, right? One person's going to be leading the conversation, you're going to be talking, the other person's listening, and then you keep switching in this kind of order. Now, when you're talking back and forth, I would say the person with more control of the conversation, or maybe more power, is the person talking. So if you're the one leading the conversation, you're kind of in the dominant role, and until someone, whether you or the other person, decides to change topics, although you're still speaking, you're going to continue going for your conversation. But another thing that I'm just kind of curious about or questioning is the power change if you're talking to someone, but they stop speaking or they stop listening, because ultimately when you're talking to someone, they no longer care to continue your conversation, it's going to stop, right? So I think in this case, there is a change in the flow and in the dynamics. And I think another thing on top of my head right now I want to talk about is, in terms of conversations, I suppose between friends, there just might be also two types. Maybe there might be more. But one thing I'm focusing on right now is just when you're sharing opinion, whether it be giving advice or whatnot, and then you ask something, they respond, or they tell you something, you listen, and then until you change the conversation topic, you move on, right? So that is one portion. And then I would say the second portion is when you say something and you don't necessarily want the feedback or the opinion of the other person, but you just want someone there to listen. And I think that itself is another type of conversation. So I kind of realized this the other day because I was speaking to my mom, and I realized my mom, she can't just listen. She has to give her opinion even though I didn't ask for it, which is, fine, it's family, whatever. But it just made me realize, could this be a generation gap? Could this be a personality difference or a cultural difference in what we're used to doing when we're talking, right? Or it could be even due to your environment, right? So do you only have friends that always come up to you because they want to know something, so you have to give your opinion, but never have friends that just want you there to listen? Because depending on one person's experience and what they're used to, if you suddenly encounter a different type of conversation where that person just wants you to listen and you don't know how, then the conversation, won't work out. So, as for right now, that's all I have to say about conversations. Now the next thing I want to talk about is friendships. And I think with friendships, oh my goodness, can't speak. Similar to conversations is there's going to be a give and take, right? Sending memes or like conversations back and forth. That's kind of friends. But when it comes to maybe having small conflicts, or what you might consider conflict is when maybe you don't get the response, or you think they might be ignoring you, and then you might get that question of like, okay, well, are we still friends? Because what if, at least what I'm thinking is, let's just say you are associated with someone, you might be friends, and although you guys speak often, you realize that oftentimes it is you who is the one initiating. You are the one giving more effort. And although you might not realize it, the effort that the other person might be giving back to you is lackluster. They're not putting in as much effort as you are. You might be, considering them as a very good friend, but they just might not see you the same way that you see them. So in this case, how you view each other, it's not balanced, right? So in this case, whether or not it is a close friendship, it's really hard to say, because unless you're kind of receiving the same kind of like effort, or you just know that person really well, I don't know how you would consider them maybe to be a close friend. Now, of course, another thing I want to put in mind is, if someone's not talking to you, it might not be personal. It might not be because they don't like you as a friend, but because they're busy. And I totally understand that, because as you're getting older, the dynamics change, right? The amount of time you have for your friends gets reduced, especially by the time maybe you're dating, you're married, whatever. And one thing it does make me wonder, maybe as someone that possibly doesn't have too many close friends, is if you're friends, shouldn't you at least keep in contact in some kind of way? Of course, like, that might be my expectation, but I don't want to string someone along if I feel like they're not in the mood for it. And obviously I can read the room, but I just want a clarification. Like, for example, if someone's interested in you, they're probably, yes, they might talk to you, but I would think they would also initiate something, at least sometime, right? Because, like, for example, if I communicated with someone quite often and then I stopped communicating because I felt like they were not reciprocating as much as I was, I'm gonna back off, because I feel like that's not fair. But then if they suddenly communicate to me, then it might balance out because they're initiating. I'm not trying to say this is like push or pull or anything, but I just think in terms of give or take, in some ways or form, it should be, relatively the same. So if I was to pull out of the conversation and then they're like, oh, why are you not speaking as much? For me, it's like, okay, well, it's because I don't think it's a fair conversation if I'm always the one initiating and you just, give me whatever back. Okay. Let's see what else I have. Now, why I talk about this is because having the experience many times before where I just let people, or people I consider that used to be my friends, I understand that our passions or interests change, right? We all have different things we like in life. We slowly might not see things in the same way anymore. We're gonna drift apart. And because of that, at least for me, if I feel like the disconnect is too big already, I don't feel the need to hold on to it, because clearly, we can't possibly talk about the same things, maybe because we don't share the same interests. But at least my mom says you should have friends from different aspects of life because they're always going to give you a different perspective. But I think you can really only have that when you guys can keep in contact or maintain the relationship, right? And another thing, this part is the self-reflection part, by the way, is what if you're the one initiating, but it's also because you see the good in people. You think they're great, but if they don't respond to you, right, they not necessarily ghost, but they don't have the time for you, they're too busy, I just feel like you're taken for granted, because they'll consider you to be always there, even maybe possibly labeling you as boring, even if that doesn't sound good. But stability, right? Stability has pros and cons, and it just makes you wonder if you're too stable, people could just lose interest because, you're always like that. You haven't really changed. And although you yourself know that you have changed since, maybe not in ways that other people can connect to, it makes me wonder if, is the wrongdoing on my part or on their part, or even if it's no one's fault, like, what should I do? What could I possibly do? Right? Because all this time I've just let it go, let friendships fade away. I'm used to it, maybe because of that, you might have trust issues, who knows? But yeah, that's just a thought that I have. That's all for me.